Hello, welcome back to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing. Myself, Dom Shaw, Scott Wilson, both of the Northern Echo. Hope you're enjoying your week, enjoying the sunshine. It's certainly been a perkier week for Sunderland this week on the back of the Granit Xhaka developments a week ago, which we're obviously going to get stuck into. If you're watching this on YouTube, then do subscribe to the channel if you don't already. And if you don't mind, that would be massively appreciated. And if you're listening on your podcast platforms, and if you could rate and review there, that would go down a treat with us as well. I was away last weekend, Scott, and I've had a couple of days away this week, so we haven't had a chance to chew the fat for probably 8 or 9 days on here. We finished the last video by saying, will Granit Xhaka still be a Sunderland player at the end of the window? We both said no.
Yeah.
How did we get then to where we are now with Xhaka staying at Sunderland?
I think so. Ultimately, because Granit Xhaka's come out and said, I agree, I'm staying at Sunderland, but there's been a few steps to get there, hasn't there? I think there's a number of things at play here. I think Sunderland's willingness to really put their foot down and be insistent that they wanted to keep Xhaka. They didn't really want to entertain any prospect of him going. I think that was clearly massively important. I do think we have to accept that Chelsea's kind of role in this is probably significant as well, in that increasingly the noises that have been coming out of Stamford Bridge suggest that while Xabi Alonso was massively driving the pursuit of Xhaka, maybe there were people above him at Chelsea that weren't so struck on it, or certainly that weren't willing to entertain anything like what Sunderland might have been able to kind of accept as a deal. And so I think it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that actually there was a big gap between what Sunderland were even willing to contemplate for Xhaka and what Chelsea felt was the going rate for a player of his age in the current market. That then, by all accounts, gets relayed to Xhaka. He's made aware of the situation, both from the Sunderland point of view, both from the Chelsea point of view. Now, at that point, Xhaka could still have really dug his heels in. You know, he could have said, no, my heart's set on Chelsea. I want to go. You're going to have to make this deal happen. The fact that he hasn't, I think, says a lot about him, says a lot about what he does still believe in Sunderland. Now, you know, I know there are some Sunderland fans who will be, well, you know, his head was turned. You can't get away from that. He was willing to walk out. You know, do we actually believe everything that he said? I get that. I do understand that. I think to a degree, that's just the reality of football, isn't it? You know, all footballers at some stage are potentially going to leave your football club. It comes back to the old cliche of the only constant in any football club is the supporters. You can't really get away from that. But I do think what Xhaka has subsequently come out and said, obviously, while he's away with Switzerland at the World Cup, you do have to take on face value. I think you do have to believe him when he says, look, you know, yes, I was interested in Chelsea. It's not happening. I'm absolutely committed to Sunderland. My family are absolutely committed to being at Sunderland. I'm excited about what next season could be. I still believe in this project. He said all the right things, hasn't he? I don't think he can do much more than that when we all know that for a little while, you know, his head was turned by Chelsea. There's no getting away from that.
I think it's like really significant for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I think it showed that Sunderland won't be pushed around by bigger clubs.
Yeah, which is important in the current climate. You look at what's happening elsewhere. Yeah,
right from the off. I think they made that clear. I think, well, 3 reasons really. The other thing, it was resolved relatively quickly. What, a week and a half, something like that?
Yeah, it certainly didn't drag on all through the summer, did it?
Before the players had even come back. And thirdly, and I think if you look at Newcastle, I know it's you know, not the kind of comparison we like to make too much on this pod, but this is a favourable comparison, absolutely, from Sunderland's perspective. If you look at Newcastle and the Isak situation last summer and how that played out, I think that's having an impact.
And what might be happening there with Bruno this summer.
Well, that's the point I'm getting to. I think that had an impact on what's happening now at Newcastle. Yeah. Because ultimately that showed that for all Newcastle were adamant, we are not selling, he's going nowhere. Isak got his way in the end and he got his move. And clearly, you know, Tonali, for example, this summer, it didn't come to that there. But players will now know, well, even if they say I'm not for sale, we saw what Isak did last summer. I think it also should, because there's going to be interest in Roofs. There's going to be interest in Brobby. I'm not necessarily this summer, but at some stage, Sadiki, Lefay, you could go on and on and on, couldn't you? We might well talking about Chemsdean Talby moving forward after his kind of first season and the experience he'll gain from that. I think it will benefit Sunderland enormously moving forward that they've won this battle.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It felt very decisive all of the way through this. Sunderland have been on the front foot, and I think that's important as well. They haven't been in retreat. They haven't been scrambling around to get something together. They haven't been briefing one way and then doing something completely different. They've been utterly consistent in what they've said.
It's felt clean, hasn't it? From Sunderland.
It has. Now, the situation would have been different if Xhaka had really decided, no, I'm past the point of no return here. I am going to Chelsea. You're just going to have to make this happen. I'm not coming back to Sunderland. Clearly, then, that is a massively different situation. But again, I think Sunderland deserve a lot of credit for the fact it didn't get to that situation, because they have been able to persuade Xhaka, A, last summer, and B, now again this summer, that this is something worth buying into and believing in. And like I say, you've got to take Xhaka on face value when he's been coming out and saying, I still believe in this project. Sunderland have clearly made a massively good job of selling what they're doing to Granit Xhaka. And if you can sell it to Xhaka, you can probably sell it to anyone.
You'd love to have been a fly on the wall in the conversation. You know what? Was it Le Bris? Was it Gazolfi? Was it one of the teammates? Was it a player? Like what was the kind of decisive moment? What swung it? Yeah. I think as well was Xhaka. And I know we just kind of taking on board what we're told here, but I think fair play to him for the honesty of saying, look, I had my head to, I was interested with the idea of going to Xhaka. He hasn't come out, has he, and said it's rubbish. I'm forever committed to Sunderland. I would never look elsewhere. I think he's been as honest as he can be, and I think I don't want to speak on behalf of the fans. Let us know in the comments. I think the supporters will respect that, won't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do. I mean, I do get the sense that there's a little bit of annoyance, hurt, disappointment, whatever. That the whole thing brewed up in the first place. Yeah. But as I say, A, that's just football, and B, that'll be completely forgotten, surely, when Granit Xhaka's walking out in those first couple of games of the season with the armband on, representing
at Karabag on a Thursday night in September.
Well, exactly. Who's going to remember it then? Clearly, he is going to be absolutely 100% committed this season.
That's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah. That there's anything going to linger here, or his performance level will drop, or we'll get to November and there'll be a host of rumours flying around about January. I don't see any of that. I think this is done now. And so I think, yes, all right, a little bit of disappointment that, after everything that was done on the pitch on the last day of the season, a month or so later, he's kind of fluttering his eyelashes at Chelsea. Yeah, but that's just the reality of football. That is the way the industry works. You're not going to get away from that. But I think we've all got to move on from that, and I think fans will.
Eliza Mienda has gone. That's the other thing that's happened since we last recorded. He completed his move to Stade Rennais at the start of this week. I think I don't know if you agree. I think like both things can be true here. I'm really sad he's gone. I loved watching Mayenda, so I'm really sad he's gone. But it's some deal, isn't it? Sunderland have gone.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those rare ones that probably suits everyone. Sunderland have got a massive profit on a player who, helped them get up, but couldn't quite do what you hoped he might do in the Premier League last season. Rennes have got a player who could quite easily in the next 2 or 3 years tear it up in League 1.
Yeah.
That would not.
I think he will. I think he will.
And Mayenda has got to move to a club where he can be the main man, rather than spend another season at Sunderland being probably third choice striker, which is what we would have looked at. Now, that's not to say if he'd stayed, he might not have been able to force his way into the team. Injuries can happen, all that kind of stuff. We know there's Europe, there's going to be more games, but he's going to be the main man where he's gone. And I think that's a massive chance for him. So, yeah, I'm like you, a little bit of sadness, because I think we both said at the start of last summer, we could have seen a scenario where Mayenda was a massive hit in the Premier
I
League.
thought he was going to take
Maybe
off.
even a late flyer for the Spain squad, I think we talked about.
Yeah, 100%.
He didn't get there. For whatever reason, he didn't get there. And I think that with that in mind, then, you know, the fee, 25 million there or thereabouts that Sunderland have got for him, that's a great deal when you think what they actually paid to sign him from Sochaux.
And there will be sell-ons in there. Someone will be protected down the line as well. It's becoming increasingly prevalent, isn't it? Where you see it now, most windows, how clubs are benefit because of the boom, really, of valuation and transfer fees in the last couple of seasons. Clubs are benefiting down the line. Let's see, because clearly we were wrong with our prediction for Mayenda last summer. But I'm like you, I could see him taking off there as the main man in respect in that division.
You think it was Josh Madger, wasn't it? And was it Bordeaux he went to? And all right, it didn't work out for him right the way through. But that first season when he first went, he scored a boatload of goals. I think Mayenda has definitely got the ability to be a success in the French top flight.
They're in the Europa League, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe a reunion at some
stage. Well, obviously they're coming back for the friendly, aren't they?
Oh, of course, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, you know, an early opportunity to say, "Oh, you big man, thanks for everything you did."
There was a new arrival this week, but not on the pitch. Jose Fonte.
Came from nowhere, really. That.
Yeah, shout out to Gary Stonehouse from the Sun because he got that exclusive, didn't he, earlier this week?
Yeah,
that Jose Fonte was coming in. Le Bris is really, really open-minded, isn't he, in terms of who and how he'll work with. And I think, you know, Ferguson used to doing it. Man United, didn't he? How he felt the kind of importance of just freshening things up with a new assistant, a new coach. And Le Bris came on his own, and then it's been like a real mixed crew, really, of lieutenants who he's had alongside him.
Hasn't it? I mean, if you think, you know, from Mike Dodds to Pedro Ribeiro to Luciano Vulcano and now to Jose Fonte. You know, it has actually been a bit of a revolving door there, but for a whole host of different reasons. You know, I don't necessarily think that's a problem. In fact, like you, I think that refreshing things and not just relying on the same voices all of the time, I think is a good thing. And like you say, Le Bris clearly just takes everything in his stride. It's an interesting appointment. I mean, obviously he was playing at the back end of last season back in Portugal, so. You know, first coaching role, clearly massive experience as a player internationally with Portugal, in England with primarily Southampton and West Ham. It's an interesting move. I mean, I think changing that scenario is generally a positive thing. But it's interesting that Sunderland have gone for someone right at the start of his coaching journey.
It's got a Monday Carabao Cup third round preview press conference. It'll be Jose speaking today, lads, rather than G, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Written all over it, hasn't it?
Could definitely see that. Yeah.
And I mean, what you would say is, what an opportunity for him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a high
start of his coaching career
to go straight into. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I say, loads of experience as a player, but nothing as a coach yet. So, what a chance, you know, for him to A, just go in at such a high level, but B, get the opportunity to work at close quarters with Le Bris and with the rest of the Sunderland team, who, you know, clearly been doing great things last season. It's it's a big opportunity for him. It'd be interesting if we do get the chance to chat to him, actually. He's always struck me as a fairly interesting fella.
Yeah, Vulcano was great last year when we got to speak to Vulcano before the Huddersfield. That was the highlight of that week because the game certainly wasn't.
The game certainly wasn't. Although it was Mark Gui's only goal, wasn't it?
Quiz question of the future. What was I going to say there? I don't think Le Bris doesn't. I say he doesn't know him. I don't think they've worked. There's been no overlap at any point.
Not to the best of my knowledge. No, not to the best of my knowledge at all.
Because Le Bris has talked about that in the past as well, hasn't he? How he likes the idea of working with someone who he doesn't know. You know, so often these days managers have their kind of band who they take with them everywhere, don't they? Whereas Le Bris is the opposite. I think he quite likes the idea of just having this completely fresh and almost outside voice, really, coming in and challenging him, maybe giving a different perspective on things.
And you've got to be, you know, you've got to have an innate self-confidence to be able to do that, don't you? You know, you've got to back yourself. You've got to trust yourself. You've got to be comfortable enough in your own skin that you don't see any threat. You don't have a problem with a bit of new face or a bit of conflict even. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it pans out. I mean, I didn't, until, like you say, the whispers started coming earlier in the week. I mean, when we met with Gazolfi, what was it, last month, we did raise the backroom staff issue, and he did kind of say, well, it's in a bit of a state of flux. There's, there has been movement there. We're not overly concerned about it, but maybe we'll look to do something. Well, they've moved pretty quickly from then.
But because Le Bris, last time we asked him, and it might have been April time, and at that stage he'd suggested, like, no, we're happy with how it looks. Yeah. But then it might well have been that Sunderland weren't actively looking, but the opportunity kind of fell in the lap, and like, you see that happens with players, doesn't it? Where you're not maybe looking at this player, but then when you get the opportunity to do it, it suddenly massively appeals. So, what? No players through the door yet.
Yeah,
is that all World Cup related?
I don't think it's just World Cup related. I mean, I think clearly the World Cup is having an impact on the transfer market as a whole. There hasn't been a whole host of deals going on yet, but there have been some. Clubs have still got business done. I think it reflects the fact that, I mean, Le Bris was flagging this up well before the end of the season when he was basically saying, it's a very different summer this to last summer. Last summer, there was so much that needed doing, and we were so kind of behind the ball because we'd been involved in the playoffs. We had to get going from the word go. We had to start bringing players in as soon as possible. This summer, it's not like that. We're not making 14 signings. It is much more strategic. It's about cherry picking who we want, when we need them, what we want. So, I don't think Sunderland will at all be fazed or concerned by this. If anything, I think this is what they'd planned and how they expected the summer to pan out. Clearly, the longer it goes on, supporters start getting a bit twitchy. You start wondering where things are at. That's only natural. There has been a little bit of a cranking up in the kind of rumour mill this week, hasn't there? Primarily being driven from Europe. Matthias Sula, Lukumi back on the kind of radar. There are names starting to emerge now. And I think that Sunderland will be looking to do at least, something probably within the next couple of weeks leading into the start of pre-season. But I don't think they're at all concerned by the fact there's been nothing going on yet.
If Jean Lukumi never pulls on a Sunderland shirt, he'll be talked about in years to come as used as like a measuring stick, won't he? For forever.
How interested are they? Yeah. Well, I mean that is a link that is constantly, clearly Sunderland like him, rate him, have been following him for God knows how long. Tried as hard as they could to get a deal done last summer, weren't able to. It would almost be a surprise if they weren't asking the question again this summer, given that his future does seem to be still in a fair bit of doubt. Sula's an interesting one as well, obviously, because Gazolfi was involved in signing him for Roma. So, I don't necessarily think that's a deal breaker anyway, a stretch of form, but there is clearly a link there. Gazolfi clearly knows the player, the family, the agents, all that kind of stuff. If it came down to Sunderland being one of 6 or 7 clubs in for him, which it might well do, if the suggestions that Sunderland's interest is serious are true, and it's got the feeling of it probably being the case, then that might be important. That personal relationship might come into play then.
I think even if all some of those names that you've linked there and some of the names that you'll have seen, I'm sure, crop out or being reported, speculated over the course of the last couple of weeks, even if there's not truth in those specific names, those profile of players feel about right, don't they, for what Sunderland will be going for this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, how many times we said it, they're not going to do anything radical. They're not going to suddenly start throwing a load of money at Premier League players that they think are overpriced and overage. There's a certain type of player that we know Sunderland are going to be going for, but, they're at Roma. They're potentially at big clubs in Germany or in France or in Spain, I think that's the subtle difference to last summer. Don't get me wrong. They signed they signed Granit Xhaka from Bayer Leverkusen. You don't get much bigger than that. But, there were also Strasbourg, Union Saint-Gilloise, that type of club. I'm not saying Sunderland won't be looking at those markets. They will, but they're able now to just pitch that little bit higher, aren't they?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because for a number of years, like when clubs were approaching transfer windows, when we were talking about like transfer strategies, Brentford and Brighton were used as the two, again, like yardsticks, weren't they? Well, look at their model. They always find a way to replace a player. Even when they lose a player, they've got the next one lined up. They're signing players and selling them on for a huge profit. I've seen a fair bit already of kind of like talk of Sunderland's model.
Yeah.
And even you touched on it earlier with the Bruno thing in Newcastle. I've read a couple of pieces and I've seen stuff on social media talking about, well, Sunderland proved it with Xhaka just because a player might want out, like Bruno suggested to do it at Arsenal, that you know, they don't always have to have the way. I mean, clearly you just want results. That's what matters. But kind of these compliments from afar, from close to home and further away, there's a real acknowledgement in the game, isn't there? It's just how impressive Sunderland's work has been.
Yeah, and I think there was a piece. I think it was on Roker Report. Apologies to the website lads and lasses if it's a different one. I think it was on Roker Report, and it was kind of just harking back to all of the past worries, grumblings, fears about the project. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
No, about the project, and you know, have we finally reached a point where we can absolutely put them to bed and say, well, the project's worked? I think we are. Yeah. We have to be, don't we? I mean, you know, the quality of player that Sunderland have brought in.
And it's evolved, hasn't it?
The money that they've raised and will raise in the future through doing that. But I think crucially, the success that they've had on the pitch while still doing that, you know, not everything, the vast majority of what they've done under the current ownership, under Christian Speakman, now under Florent Gazolfi, has worked and set Sunderland on the right track. I don't think that's deniable now.
Who's Sunderland still going to the World Cup then? Xhaka, obviously.
Yes.
Is that it?
Jordan Pickford.
yeah.
The picture came up again, didn't it, in the week of him going to the Newcastle away game, leading the group of away fans. That's a brilliant picture.
I spoke to Craig Little. I spoke to Craig Little this week, who is the academy manager at Middlesbrough now, but he previously worked in the academy at Sunderland years and years ago, worked with Pickford, and then went on to Darlington and was manager there and gave Pickford his debut, didn't he? When Pickford was 17 on loan, and he was talking about that, and he was talking about how well Sunderland managed him, how well Sunderland looked after him and helped him progress through the age groups. But he was just saying how kind of like straight away you just knew with him. He remembers like a couple of minutes into his debut, they were playing Fleetwood. Jamie Vardy was meant to be playing, but he was injured, and like a couple of minutes in, he comes out and claims a massive cross. And like, you just saw everyone around him, like the defenders and him as well, take a, so he's going to become the most capped World Cup keeper.
Yeah.
On Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, what, I know I'm pointing out nothing.
What a career. I mean, I remember
we were having a conversation, you know, if England win the World Cup, will he go down as England's greatest ever keeper, or is that far overdoing it? I mean, is he in the conversation?
No, I think he will, because I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think the only one he's really up against is Gordon Banks, and it's clearly difficult because we didn't see Gordon Banks. You know, I know Gordon Banks won the World Cup. I know he made that save against Pele. I have absolutely no idea what he was like game in, game out for England. You know what I mean? So I think, you know, an awful lot is, well, Gordon Banks has to be number one because he won the World Cup. If England win this World Cup, I think Jordan Pickford immediately becomes England's greatest ever goalkeeper. I do. I really do. Yeah. And like I say, you know, I remember speaking to him a couple of times very early in his career and just being impressed by how assured he was really about everything, you know, not cocky, not arrogant, just completely assured at a really young age.
He's always remained very normal as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, and that's what endears him to a lot of people, you know. He's got that spark about him, that little cheeky bent, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's never really lost that, has he?
No.
You know, you definitely feel like he's still the same lad that came through at Sunderland and
the Henderson one was the Henderson one was naughty, mine, wasn't it? That was
I feel sorry for him. At least he's he's not going to play in the tournament anymore. Let's be honest, he probably wouldn't have played anyway, would he? At least he's going to be able to be back in and around the camp and part of it. And I think that's one thing Tuchel's done very well with England. I think he will be made to feel absolutely part of it. I think the rest of the players in that squad, rate what he gives them, like him. He's a massive part of that bond there. Tuchel clearly values him highly. You could see how upset he was about what had happened in the wake of the game at the weekend. So, I think Jordan will be made to feel part of that squad. And, to have two born and bred Weirsiders potentially as World Cup winners, 3 games away from being World Cup winners. It's incredible, really.
We're recording this on Friday, so apologies if you're watching on Sunday and Monday. And if you are, hopefully England have got the job done.
And Erling Haaland's put a hat-trick past
Jordan Pickford makes 2 mistakes. You were out there for the start. Will you be? Was there any temptation to go back out if England get the final? If England,
there's a massive temptation. It's can I get a pass, and then can I? The problem, obviously, and I know fans who are in this boat as well, is you can take a gamble now on flights and everything for the final, and they're expensive, but they're doable. But clearly England are still 2 wins away from that. They've got to beat Norway. They've probably potentially got to beat Argentina. Do you take that risk and end up paying an absolute shed load? And this is both from a personal point of view for fans and everything, and obviously from a company point of view and the journalistic side of it as well, and potentially end up spending that money to report on Argentina against Spain. Or do you wait until the semi? But then obviously, the minute England look like they're going to win that semi-final, I would imagine all bets are off then in terms of flights anyway. So we will see. Watch this space.
Well, good luck to Sunderland's Granit Xhaka. That's the early hours, isn't it?
Yes, that's early hours Sunday morning. Yeah.
Argentina,
and of course, what you've got to remember as well is the actual final is 24 hours after the really big game of the weekend, York Sunderland.
Oh yes, of course, because we were planning our our pre-season routine, weren't we?
Yeah,
it all starts again.
So it's all very well saying what's going to happen in the MetLife, but what's going to happen at the LNER Community Stadium?
And that's a reminder, isn't it? So I remember doing the first pre-season, I think it was Shields, wasn't it, last year? Habib Diarra had signed, but I think he was the only one through the door at that point, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and I remember Dan Neil was playing, and we spoke to Niall Huggins afterwards, and Huggins was saying, and that's a reminder, isn't it? When we were saying there about signings through the door of how much changes between the first game of pre-season and the first game of the Premier League season.
And I remember going and watching them get, let's be honest, pretty much battered up with Hearts. Now, in hindsight, Hearts, obviously, fair play, went on and had an incredible season, didn't they, themselves? But you were coming away from that game thinking, goodness me, where is Sunderland at here? They look miles off there. And then, pre-season's pre-season, isn't it? It serves a purpose. But I think if there's ever a don't get drawn in by results, performance levels, especially early in pre-season, which that was. Hearts were a couple of weeks ahead of Sunderland in terms of their physical preparation. Then that was absolutely it.
Class. Well, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As I said at the start, if you are watching on YouTube, then do subscribe if you haven't already, and get in touch in the comments. Give us a shout in the comments if there's anything you want us to have a chat about in the weeks ahead. And if you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review there as well. That would be massively appreciated. Enjoy the game on Saturday night, whatever your plans are for it. Take a punt. If you're thinking of going out and England get the job done on Saturday night, take a punt.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week with our next episode of We Are Sunderland. Take care.